This video is about installing RapidMiner server, specifically on an Ubuntu machine. Documentation's tricky, it can be just tricky to find it, so this video draws it all together to show the prerequisites and specific installation steps needed to get a basic installation working. So we'll cover the prerequisites, which are essentially Java and the database that you need. Then you run the installer, you complete the install. Then we'll confirm it worked. We'll also install some extensions because they're useful. And then finally we'll access using RapidMiner Studio from somewhere else. Okay, so job one. Let's go to an Ubuntu machine. Now here is an Ubuntu machine that I happen to be running in a virtual environment. I'm using Oracle VM VirtualBox. Very nice piece of software indeed, actually. Obviously it's Ubuntu 12.0 for long-term support is what I happen to be running. Others obviously will work, but clearly we have to pick one, so here's the one I've picked. Virtual machines are good because obviously if you mess up and you've taken a backup previously, you can go back to that, which is, believe me, very handy. Now I've created a little checklist. Here it is. So let's just go through these one by one. So firstly, we've done Ubuntu. Tick. Next, RapidMiner server software. Okay, so let's find that next. Okay, so the software itself, I go to my file system. I have created a folder called RapidMiner server. I just picked underneath my home folder. Obviously you can choose somewhere of your own. You need obviously write permissions to that. So I happen to own that. I'm logging in as me, and I can obviously change stuff in my own folder. So RapidMiner server. So inside there is a zip file which you download from the RapidMiner website. Let's unzip the contents of that, which is what we've got to do. So it's basically, you do this, and I'm simply going to place it in my RapidMiner server folder. So if I just do an extract, we'll pause it because it takes a bit of time. Okay, finished, took about 30 seconds. So it's done that. Let's convince ourselves it's done a good job. So sure enough, there's a folder called RapidMiner Server Installer. Inside that, various files, and there's a jar file. This is the key file that we need. So let's exit that. Let's tick this one. Right, next, Java. Now Java, to show the version of Java, I'm going to go to the terminal window. I'm going to do here, and I've already installed Java on this machine. And you do that by doing something like sudo apt get install and then a Java version, or you can use the software center here to do it. I won't show that, but anyway, if you do Java minus version, sure enough, there it is. It has to be greater than 1.6, I believe. This is quite a modern one. Now what you also have to do is define an environment called Java Home. Whoops, I made the classic mistake. Now I haven't defined this at the moment, so I have created a little shell script. I shall just type this in. So basically you do Java underscore home equals okay, and then sure enough, if I echo it again, it's up, 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 up. Hopefully everything's okay now. So we have a version of Java installed, we have an environment variable. Next, the database. Now, the database, I happen to be using MySQL. You could use Postgres if you wanted. If this is a Windows machine, SQL Server, and I'm sure there are others. I've simply picked MySQL because it's easy. Postgres, I have done installs with Postgres, so that's okay as well. Now, the two prerequisites you have to go through, you have to create a database called Rapid Analytics inside your database engine of choice, and then a user. Now, I happen to be using WebMin, which is here. This is a really cool way of administering Linux systems, so I urge you to look into it, WebMin. Just to tempt you, you can see all sorts of things about your system, and you add more and more servers here. So you can see here's MySQL database server, and you can create a new database using the WebMin GUI. Now obviously you can use MySQL tools directly, I'll leave that with you. But anyway, the Rapid Analytics database, quite straightforward. It's empty, I think, when I click on this. Sure enough, not much in it at all. The installer of RapidMiner server will create tables. The other thing you need is a user called Rapid Analytics. And sure enough, I've created one here, and it's a pretty powerful user. I think it can do everything, and obviously it has a password, so don't forget to remember that. Okay, so I've created a database and a user, and I know the password, so let's tick that. So now let's run the installer. So what you do, you go back to the terminal window, you go to the place where the jar file is, RapidMiner server installer .jar, the thing we unzipped earlier, and now we're going to do this, java -jar RapidMiner server installer .jar, and now we see Java home, we notice is set to the correct value. Now we're going to do the work. So it's reminding us that we need a database, which we have, so that's good. So now we're going to say yes, we agree to sign our lives away, and I'm going to choose basically the same folder at the top level. Obviously you can choose your own, but I just keep it simple, all in one place. So I'm going to install it alongside the original zip file. Okay. Now this is where you enter a license key. This is a demo, just evaluation one, so you don't need to do anything. If you had a license key, there would be some work to do here. Moving on, now the host machine, it happens to be Ubuntu. Port 8080 is the port used to access it remotely. We'll leave it, default it. Next, database host, so you have to fill in the name of your database. Now it's localhost port 3306, which is the default for MySQL. Obviously, if you had another database like Postgres or MySQL or Oracle, you change that, but I'm going to leave it as is. Obviously, the database schema is Rapid Analytics. You could change that, I suppose, if you wanted to. If you created it with a different name. Password, which luckily I've remembered, and if I do a test now, it worked, so that's good. So I can see the database now, username and password's okay, so let's rock and roll. So next thing, an email server, if you want to send emails from this, which is optional, so I'm going to just skip over that. Now I'm going to install RapidMiner server. I'm not going to bother with this installer script, which I think you use that if you want to then recreate this later, but I'm going to crack on, install. And we'll just watch what happens. In fact, I'll probably pause the video because it may take a few minutes, so I'll pause and we'll come back when something interesting has happened. Okay, it finished. Took a couple of minutes. So next what we do is we have to now start up the server itself. So here are the instructions. So we have to notice that we're going to have to go to the command line, and then we're going to have to visit the web page of the server. There's a notice that there's a password for the user called admin is change it, but I'm not going to change that for now because it just slows us down. Anyway. Okay, so let's follow the instructions. So job 1, we have to go to folder underneath the original install place in bin. So it's basically home RapidMiner server /bin, and there should be a file there called standalone.shell script. So what you do is this. You run it by doing /. Why Unix doesn't have just a run command is beyond me. Anyway, we run it, and let's watch. So sure enough, it's running up, and this machine is quite a small machine, so it'll take a minute or two. I'll pause. Okay, so it took about, well, it says here 2 minutes. And now, loads of errors flow by, and you get really depressed and miserable about it. But basically, if it comes up with this sort of line here, then it looked like it worked. So let's follow the next instruction and visit its web page. So I'm going to minimize that. Oops. So now I'm going to bring up the web page of the server. Here we are. And we're going to go to the local host. Port 8080. And with luck and a following wind, we should see a friendly login page, which gives us confidence that we're getting there. Okay, now this machine's a little bit underpowered, so it's a little bit slow. But anyway, we'll log in, admin, and it was change it. We'll leave it like that for now because we can do that later. So now I'm logging in for the first time. Now it wants me to complete the installation. So now we have to basically leave these defaults alone, and we have to pick a folder for a plugin directory and an upload directory, which I'll fill those in a moment. So I'm going to go into look at the folder structure on my machine, and we basically have to use a folder from here for the plugins folder, and which is that one there. That's used for the plugin folder there, and the other one is I used tump here for the upload directory. So basically what you do, you put the fully qualified domain name in here, so it's like home Andrew RapidMiner server /plugins, and to save me typing that again, I'll cut and paste and change the end here. So now we have set the folders for the plugin and upload directories, and now let's hit rock and roll. And this takes a bit of time, so I'll pause the video and come back when something interesting happens. So the first part was quite quick, so now complete the installation. Here we go. Looks like everything's finished. So now we're actually logged into the server, and you can get a view as to what's going on. So you can see, for example, there's a link to a repository. There are some processes. The key thing is this administration thing, so we'll look at that first. But to prove we're actually successfully logged in, I'm going to log off and log back in, just to prove that I'm not cheating. So here's admin. Let's change it as the password. So if I log in now, we should just get back to the thing you first saw. So basically it's working, so this is good. So we've got there, so we should allow ourselves a brief moment of celebration. Let's go back to the checklist to see what's left to do. So we completed the installation, and let's take the logging in as success. Now let's have a quick look at some of the things you can do. So as you saw, administration, basically this lets you create users. So for example, as admin obviously, so I could, for example, add a user. So let me do that, because I always like to add myself as a user. So I'm going to give myself that'll do. So I've created myself a user called Andrew. There it is. So sure enough, admin Andrew. Okay. There are certain other settings. So here, for example, the basic system settings. You can see here the plugin and upload folders that we set, and other things like that. There are other properties you can add here, more advanced. Come back to that in another video. Just to get a view on the repository. Obviously there's nothing in this repository at the moment. But you can see every user gets a home admin or home Andrew or home and username folder, and the root folder looks something like this when I've clicked here. And you can see there's one called demo, one called groups. There's a folder under there, and this is where the users go in the home folder. See admin and Andrew, and there are lots of things which is not for the subject for today. But anyway, success. So next job, let's install some extensions. Right, so what you do, you actually have to download the extensions you want to install and place them in the folder which we pointed to earlier. And you can see by default, obviously, there are no extensions installed. And if you click on the operators and extensions option here, you can see these are what you'll see are the default operators. And by clicking on this tab, there are no extensions. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to find a load of extension jar files which you download from the RapidMiner site and in fact their marketplace. And what you do is you place them in the plugins folder. So what we'll do, so here's the plugins folder. Now I happen to have in a downloads location, I happen to have downloaded all of the jar files. So what you tend to see is they're called RMX underscore RapidMiner extension, I guess, .jar. So what you do is you copy these, Control C, and I'm going to put them in the plugin folder, which is there. So if I just paste them all in here, quite big. Okay, and I now have to restart the RapidMiner server. So if you remember, this was started using the standalone shell script, so I'm going to terminate that and restart it, and then it should just pick up the correct extensions. So at the command line, I'm now going to run the standalone shell script again. It takes 2 minutes, so I'll pause the video until it's finished. Okay, so it finished. It took a bit longer this time. Let's see if we can convince ourselves that it worked. So I'll log in to the server, port 8080 on the local machine. Log in as admin. And we should see, when we look at the processes and extensions, we should see some new extensions have shown up. Go to the admin, operators and extensions. A bit slow today. Here we go. If I click on this tab, we should see a load of extensions. Interestingly, even the R extension seems to have made it, which is good. R can be problematic, but R by default is installed on Ubuntu quite nicely, so I have a suspicion that it will just work very well. R gives problems in general, and it may well be that the R Java extension, I may not have installed that, so that may not work, but let us, for the sake of argument, say that worked. Success. Okay, so now let's return to the checklist. So last thing, let's do some remote access. And now what we're going to do is log in to the server from another place, and then we'll use RapidMiner Studio rather to access the server, just to prove that that's working. So I'm going to log off here, and now I'm going to open a browser in another place. Okay, so to do that, you need to know the IP address, or the address of the machine where the server's running. and I happen to have a terminal window here, so if I do ifconfig like this, it's actually running on 192.168.1.90, and it'll have a name as well, but just to prove that it works, I'm going to use this IP address and the port 8080 now. So I start up a browser. Here's one I prepared earlier, and I'm going to go to 192.168.1.90.8080. And we should see a login screen, and if I do admin change it, we should get logged in quite quick actually. And go to the admin screen, operators and extensions. Sure enough, hopefully you can convince yourself that this is the same server that we've been installing. It's all good. Now, final thing, let's run RapidMiner Studio. Actually, in passing though, I just need to show you one thing that can be important. Now, I was using webmin to administer my server, so the firewall is important, so you must ensure that port 8080 is opened. So when I'm on another machine accessing this server from that remote location, the firewall by default will stop that from happening. So port 8080 must be opened in order for that to work. Okay, and in fact you'll need that as well at RapidMiner Studio connection. So here's RapidMiner Studio. What you do is you create yourself a new repository. I'm going to call it RM Video. Oops, and it's on 192.168.1.90, and we might as well use, let's use admin. I'll change it to password. And you can do a check connection settings just to convince yourself it's all working. That's good, it's working. So we've got that going. Now if we expand this, we should now see folders here. Now let's just create a really simple process. I'll just create some random data because I can't think of anything else. Now if I save that, in this location, so I shall save it in the admin folder, and let's call it first process. Can't think of a good name. What will be happening now is that this has been stored, as you can see here, on that server. Now you can now run it. You can do run on RapidMiner server now. So let's do that, and we'll watch the terminal window. So you can see here is the terminal window actually executing that process. In other words, it's worked. If we go back to the studio, we can also check on the server itself. Let's there we go. It looks like it worked. My first process, it seems to have worked. I quite like the finish successfully here. So beyond the scope of this video to go into the details of that. Final thing, let's look at the actual server login. So if I go to here and look at the repository now, if I go to the repository of the admin user, we can see there's my first process, and sure enough, it's made it to the repository. So now you can start to save processes and actually execute them remotely from another location. So anyway, let's go back to the checklist, and I think we can declare victory and say we did everything. So on that happy note, let's leave it as that.